Swaha Tatsavitu Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. Om Bhurvasvaha Tatsavitu Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat.
Okay, Saroj, you can welcome Varsha and welcome everybody.
Yeah, I think Varsha, if you remove your screen thing, I can only see your screen at the moment, the one you are sharing. Yeah, that's better. I can see now everybody. Yeah. Welcome everyone for this wonderful talk, which will be very helpful to all of us. I'd like to introduce Geeta, the founder of our Women to Women, and myself, Saroj. I'm one of the admins. And the lady who's going to do the talk is Varsha Dodhia. She currently works with NHS Central Northwest London Trust Mental Health and Community as a service improvement manager. She also takes active part in Harrow Council, Northwest London Integrated Care and wider NHS as a lay partner advisor. Varsha played an active role during the first 2 years of COVID, managing a PPE hub and supporting vaccination sites. Her team awarded a COVID star recently. While caring for her in-laws, Varsha understood challenging faced by older people in the UK. She is actively involved in dementia and elderly care. As a champion, Varsha is also a UK qualified teacher. Welfare of children and young people is very close to her heart. Welcome, Varsha.
Welcome, Varsha.
Thank you. I'll just do slide share and thank you very much. Namaste, everyone. Yes. And thank you, Geeta Ben and Saroj Ben, for giving me the opportunity to speak to your group today. As Saroj Ben said, I have a personal experience of caring for elderly, my in-laws, in the family home. And this is when my dementia journey started. So whatever I give examples of, a lot of them are from my own family. And, it's what I call lived experience. So what I sometimes do is I share my experience. And one thing I have been really, really touched by is how much care is given in our community. We do look after our elderly, and sometimes, the NHS will tell you they look after their own, but it's not an easy journey. So predominantly, it's the women who do the caring. So today's talk really speaks to all the women and also the men, because I now know men who have become carers because their wife have dementia. So today's talk is just addressing all the people who are touched by dementia in their families, or may know somebody, or just for information that you would like to find out more. So subject, dementia. A lot of people ask me, what is dementia and what is Alzheimer's? Because I think, we use the two words interchangeably. If I try to explain, dementia is like an umbrella word. If you talk about cancer, cancer is an umbrella word. But under that, you might have blood cancer, you might have breast cancer, you might have cancer of the thyroid or the intestines. So there are different types of cancers. So, same way, dementia is an overarching word, and there are different types of dementia. Actually, there are about 100 different types of but the most common one is Alzheimer's. And the other one, which we from the South Asian community really need to know about, it's called vascular dementia. So these two are the really big ones. And dementia is something that affects your brain. It affects your memory. It affects your thinking ability. And once it starts interfering with what you need to do every day, that's when people notice that, somebody has dementia. The question is, who gets dementia? Mainly it affects older people, all right? So usually, people in their late 70s, 80s, that's when people start noticing that people may have dementia. But this disease can affect people under 65. I've recently been to a funeral of somebody who was 63 years old. He had been working in, and then in the last 3 years, so much of it changed and it progressed very, very quickly. So in this country, previously it was, at age 65, a person would retire and you would get a pension. So if you were under 65, they called it a young onset dementia. So sometimes you would hear that somebody who is much younger, they would say it's a young onset dementia. So as I said, it affects people who are much older predominantly. It's not that it's just men or women. And sometimes people get this notion of women getting dementia because, when you see pictures of care homes and whatever, you see older women, what we call dosimas, with dementia, because women tend to live longer. So, that's why the proportion of people living longer in their later years getting dementia, that is the reason. There's something about genetics. And, a lot of people now ask that we never had it before, but maybe there might have been. But what has happened in one generation is the life expectancy has increased. Before we would say anybody 65, 70 is much older. Good for you. But nowadays, we feel at 65, 70 quite young, and we're now looking into the 80s. So some of these diseases, even if they were known, they were not seen so much. And what has happened is that we may have other conditions because as we age, sometimes, we get high blood pressure, we have put on weight, we get diabetes, other things as well. So there are things which complicate this disease. I'm going to talk about diet a little bit more, smoking and drinking. And one thing that is really predominant, and as us as Asian community, is, when we say, when we make tea, before we used to make in saucepans that were made with aluminium or tin. Now they recommend, because the aluminium starts oxidizing and it dissolves in the water. All right. And these deposits go into the brain. So something I would recommend everyone that find a stainless steel saucepan or whatever, if you're going to make tea, because when you boil water in aluminium, it really oxidizes. So I'm just going to do it there. It's not widely talked about. For our community, this is really important. So as I said, types of dementia. I mean, this is a percentage. So more, about 2/3 of the people in the UK, they have Alzheimer's. But if you see that green color, a lot of the South Asians fall into that vascular dementia category, or the blue color, which is mixed. So it combines Alzheimer's and vascular dementia. There are small other ones, which is like something that happens in the front part of the brain. That's called frontotemporal. There's something called Lewy bodies. If all of you remember, late 90s, we had the mad cow disease. Do you remember when those big cows were just shaking and they would fall over? And we called it mad cow disease. So if it had come into people, then it would have been called CJD. And that would have been a part of dementia. So the mad cow disease was actually a dementia in all those cattle. Okay. So, and because of the kind of proteins they were given, it affected their brain. So, something like this just not only affects people, it affects other animals as well. And sometimes Parkinson's and dementia can come together. So Parkinson's is actually a neurological condition. In Gujarati, we call it kampwa, apno hath truje, right? I'm trying to use some words because I thought some people would better understand in Gujarati. So it's a neurological condition, but because it also affects the brain, this is part of the dementia. So just a little bit, because this is really important. So when you say brain, so where is the brain? The brain is under our skull. And it weighs like a kilo, a bag of sugar. And its consistency is like a jelly. It wobbles like a jelly, okay? And there are three major parts of the brain. So the one is the thinking brain. There's something in the center of it, which is the feeling brain. And the final part of the brain is actually something that runs through our backbone, the stem. Nerves, that's also part of the brain system. So these three things combine together to form the whole brain structure. So what happens when somebody starts getting dementia? Okay, really, really important. So if you don't remember anything about this talk, just take this picture. Because, sometimes we say, how do we get blood into the brain? We actually use 20 to 25% of the blood in our brain. So even if you're just sitting, watching television, the oxygen needs to go into your brain, okay? And when the oxygen supply is restricted, that's when you start getting, the brain dead or changes in the brain, okay? And this is really important. So one way to keep yourself healthy is really making sure that you get good oxygen into your brain. So whoever has watched yoga in Ramdev, he does Kapalabhati, like pushing pranayam. He pushes the way through his stomach, the brain, the blood rushes towards the brain. And that's why he says you get a real shine on your forehead, yeah? But there is real scientific, technically, that when you get better oxygen supply in your brain health is really, really good, okay? So this is something really to think about, what we are doing to get a good oxygen supply in our brain. I'll talk about the Alzheimer's first. So, it's like when we age, and sometimes before, like people used to have dentures, and they would say, the dentures have become loose. What has happened? The plastic hasn't changed, but their jaw, their face, that has changed. It started shrinking. Some people actually lose height. The ladies, they would say, right? So you start losing height, you start losing bone weight as well. But these changes start also happening in your brain. And when it starts getting really fast, so this one shows, the good normal brain on the left-hand side, and then somebody with Alzheimer's, the brain starts shrinking and again starts getting gaps in there. So physiologically, the brain is affected as we start getting older. So sometimes, we get upset with people who can't remember, who are finding it difficult to do things. Even as us, as we start driving, as we get older, our peripheral vision, before when we are young, we could see things on the side. As we start getting older, our vision starts narrowing. So these are the physical changes that happen as we start aging. But with person with an Alzheimer's, what happens is that they start getting the neurons in their brain, which get like tangles. It starts getting tangles, and like they get a plaque. Okay, brain ma jaku padi jai. So some in Gujarati there is a kehawat ke magajnu dahi thai gyo che. In this, there are changes in the brain, that it starts getting these kind of plaques. The normal cells are on the right-hand side, what you see there, there's a physical change in the brain. And what happens is that when this starts happening, the nerves and cells start dying. So what they can do is, if they've just had a cup of tea, after half an hour, they can't remember they've just had a cup of tea. But they might be able to remember things that were old times, what they used to do when they were younger. And this is because physically, the wiring starts getting affected in the brain. So, whatever times you try to make them remember, but if the wiring connections haven't happened, then it's very difficult for them to remember afterwards. It's almost impossible. And we who are looking after them, if we understand that these physical changes are happening in their brain, then how we respond to them, how we look after them, that starts kind of, because we understand what's happening to them. So how does it start? Usually it starts in one part of the brain, and sometimes it might affect one area. So think about it. If somebody used to be really good, they could drive somewhere, or they could take 3 buses, get somewhere, suddenly they start feeling less confident because they can't remember all the things. So you will see they start making notes on a notebook, because a person will feel that at the early start that something is not quite right, but they compensate it, because we as human beings are quite clever. We can quite hide, and use coping strategies to to compensate if things are happening. But as it starts getting more, that's when it starts changing things into your body. So sometimes a person with Alzheimer's will start seeing things. They said, or they start hearing voices. They start feeling that the day and night is different, because there are physical changes in their brain and their relationship to it. And this is when we, the family members, start noticing that the person is now not the same person. They're having difficulty thinking. They're having difficulty remembering, difficulty handling money, right? So how much do you need to pay, whatever. Organizing their thoughts. And I give an example. Usually when we have a wedding in the family, the older person will start, and they'll start with the family tree. One after another, they can remember the whole tree. But, you start noticing that some of those things they could do very well before, they're finding it difficult. With women also, the way they handle in the kitchen, you will start seeing changes from before to now. So this is how it starts spreading. And then towards the end, when we see this person which has serious dementia or serious Alzheimer's, their personality has changed. Because they can't understand what's happening to them, they react. So their personality changes. Sometimes they hit out. Sometimes it's just the kantarijai, that they feel they are locked within the 4 walls. And especially when they can't remember their friends and family. For the person, it's really, really distressing. And for people who are next to them, it's also very distressing. And, this is the really, really difficult time when a person cannot communicate what they want, and they can't even look after themselves. And this is when the stage of dementia, when they need a lot of care. Because even things like, going to the toilet, their food taste, how they talk to people, everything starts changing. So sometimes they say, okay, what has happened? There are a lot of people who were very active, had a very good life. You see the top line. Yes, as they age, things start getting a bit slower, but no noticeable change. There are others who say, okay, have a good point. We talk about senility, but normally it doesn't affect, what they do day to day. And then you see the person going down. So sometimes what happens is they've had a urine infection or whatever. At that time, they get a bit delirious. It starts affecting what they're thinking, what they can remember. But then once the infection is cleared, it comes back to normal. Okay, so that's where you see the bottom line with a little section in yellow, and then it picks up. But somebody who is going to get real Alzheimer's disease, it's a progressive disease. So it starts with mild, then moderate, and then very severe. And it starts getting down. And the speed with which, it starts going down depends on individuals and how their life is. But it can be up to 10 years, right? From the start of dementia towards the end. So it's a fairly long journey for people who are caring for them. So say, okay, what happens when there is mild dementia, then moderate dementia, and going towards a severe dementia? So I've just listed out some of the things that they become a bit forgetful. The short-term memory, I just said, they've had a cup of tea and after having a fair, oh, did I have a cup of tea today? Or, I haven't had my 4 o'clock cup of tea or something like that. The same questions get repeated because they haven't quite worked out. So, the repetitive questions, and also about hobbies. So there are people who love playing cards or who love going out. They start restricting their movement. And, it's like even sometimes said, do you want to come out, or do you want to come to the our community center? And if 3 or 4 people are talking, they feel, oh, I don't want to go there. Right? Because sometimes they find those difficulties. And this is when it's kind of mild dementia. As it progresses, that's when people start making, making decisions very, very difficult. And I'm showing this graph because when do we intervene is really important, because in this country, there are laws. So when does a person have mental capacity to make decisions about their financial affairs and how, what care they would need? So in the mild dementia, you still have good, you can still make the decisions. But as you go down moderate and moderately severe and severe dementia, then your mental capacity has really started being impacted. Okay, and the psychological symptoms about the personality changes, gusse thi jaye, or some people just withdraw into themselves. They don't speak a lot. And you feel they're just completely depressed. It may not just be depression, because depression has other things. That dementia is just make them personally go inside, that they don't want to interact with anybody. And one thing with dementia is that the concept about time changes in their brain. We have a clock in our brain. People have a regular time when they wake up. They know when they have their lunch, their dinner, they go to sleep. With dementia, as I showed you, if it starts affecting your brain, your time sense completely goes. And then when it's very severe, it's like somebody in a really care home, who cannot recognize anybody. They have no speech. They can't even control their continence. They have very little control over their body, right? So that's when the severe dementia sets in. So a lot of people will ask me, so what's the difference? What is the science of Alzheimer's? And then sometimes just us all just having a bad day or forgetting. We all make mistakes, but when these mistakes keep on repeating, that's when you start saying, okay, there's something around this, that person's memory and their judgment is going. Something about not remembering to make payments. Before, people used to have to go to the post office to collect their pension. They would make the payments. A lot of this is now set up online. But this is when the family member need to start reminding, prompting them of things that they need to do. So this is, when you start noticing that you have to prompt them. Oh, have you had a shower today? Before, it was like everything happened clockwork, but then things start going different. Losing track of time and date. So one of the questions when you go to the GP, they will ask you 4 or 5 questions. But okay, so what's the day today? Who's the Prime Minister today? It's just to understand, where you are with your memory. Something that people in your family you should notice is about the conversation. So people with dementia, if there are 3 or 4 people talking, they cannot follow the train of thought for 3 or 4 people speaking. So especially when the dementia sets in, just what you need to do is a one-to-one conversation, right? Because they cannot have 3 or 4 people. And that's when they would say, oh, the TV is going on, somebody's having a conversation, the phone is ringing. That is very difficult for them. And then misplacing things. And this becomes really pronounced because they put something somewhere, forgotten about it. And sometimes they accuse, oh, somebody's stolen it, right? That kind of Cheerio swabhav, as we call it. And that starts happening. Or they're not able to retrace what has happened. So before this sets in, there are some things that need to be done to help them manage what the time is going to come afterwards. So these are the kind of key differences between person with Alzheimer's or dementia and just normal aging. So I'm going to talk about the vascular dementia. And when you talk about vascular, that means it is about our arteries, our veins, and the capillaries, about the blood supply in our brain. So, when we go to any function or whatever, people are talking, somebody would say, I had to be in hospital, they had to put 2 stents into me. Or, oh yeah, I've had a bypass surgery. Now, we can all talk about how to prevent heart attacks. So we know about how do you do cardiovascular treatment. But think about it. If there's a blockage of one artery in your brain, or the artery has become less elastic, what do you think is going to happen? Sometimes in those little thread-like vessels, you get mini strokes. And sometimes if it's a big one, you get a massive stroke, right? So something that is good for your heart is also good for your brain. And this is where us as South Asians, because we get cardiovascular diseases or we have more propensity for it, for us to get vascular dementia is quite high. And this is slightly different from Alzheimer's because it comes in a step. Imagine, the blood pressure has gone really high and you get little breaks, even maybe when you are sleeping. So you don't realize that, I have paralysis in my body or something. And just like when you get a little bleed, you get a kind of a scar on it. But this scarring you can't see. You get a bruise and then it starts scarring. And there are places in the brain that start getting scarring. And this is where the memory loss or the eye loss or what they can't see suddenly or hearing, this happens. But this is very frightening. So part of the reaction to the vascular dementia is that it happens suddenly, that emotionally you get kind of upset. And again, you're followed. It becomes that something is happening in your brain and you can't understand what's happening to you. Around walking, and this is what you would notice because the blood supply is kind of restricted, that the person starts shuffling. So this is one thing, if you're an older person and then they start shuffling, and if they can't control going to the bathroom or whatever, just ask them, ask your GP to check this out. Because, the early sign, and if they give blood thinners or something, you can delay this, okay? So for us, within the South Asian community, looking after our heart, looking after our arteries and our circulatory system is really, really important. Otherwise, it will get us to a place where we will start getting vascular dementia. So one thing is, okay, what do you need to do? And the last 2 years, it has been very, very difficult to get an appointment with your GP, right? I know it has been very difficult, but as people start aging, there's no other way out. Because sometimes if you end up in hospital, you get a diagnosis in hospital, they send you back to your GP. So if you think your loved one, your elderly in your family, some of the things that I've described, you need to take them to the GP and don't let them go on their own. let somebody go with them and explain ek bahata. And, like the GP was talking to her and she would say, oh, what do you do when you get up in the morning? And she said, yeah, I just do my brush and whatever. And then I have this cupboard and I go and talk to the cupboard. It came out like that. Actually, then her daughter-in-law had to say, what Ma does is that she has her murtis in the cupboard, a little mandir in the cupboard, and she does her prayers. But if that little information, because the Ma wasn't able to say it properly, would have given a very different diagnosis. Yeah. So for this condition or whatever, when they do go to the GP, when they try to do the assessment, let somebody be there with them. Even if it's not your family member, or take a friend along with you, because some of the questions that they ask and assessment they do, or sometimes they give an answer which is really vague and the GP won't do anything. But you, if you know that person very well, then you know that, something is not quite right. And the way the person is answering is not quite right. So usually the GP will do a small test. And if they suspect something, they will get a blood test, because for them to make a referral that, there isn't an infection, or they haven't got iron deficiency or B12 deficiency. So some of these things, they need to do a blood test and they'll do a bit of a physical examination. So this is really, really important. The next thing is, if somebody is suspected, they're sent to a memory clinic. So if you live in Brent, the memory clinic is very near Steg Lane, Fairfield Road. If you live in Harrow, it's at Bentley House. And usually, they say they could see you within 6 weeks. After the pandemic, I'm not quite sure. But this memory clinic visit is really important. And the first appointment is really, really, really important. If you don't get this right, then things will start getting delayed. Because this is where, if there is some issue, they will try to do an identification and maybe send you for a scan if they suspect something. Because with the vascular dementia, the only way to really know is with a scan, if there is a little bit of scarring in the brain. And they will ask some of the support questions, and they might trial out some medication, because initially there are 1 or 2 medications that work. So they might do that. But this first appointment takes about 1 to 2 hours. So if anybody gets referred to a memory clinic, make sure somebody goes with them. This is really, really important. And they will ask lots of questions, especially around, where were you born? What sort of life journey have you had? A behavior assessment, because some of the things, whether you are scared, have you got anxiety? They might try to see if you've got depression, to rule it out, that it's actually now progressive dementia. And sometimes they would do a scan. So there are different types of scan. So first one on the left-hand side is a CT scan. And then, the CT scan can show certain things. There is an MRI scan, and the MRIs are now really good. They can do at different parts of the brain. And for some, especially the vascular bit, they give you a bit of a dye, and then they scan your brain. Because sometimes the blockages where they happen, it's difficult to see even on an MRI scan. And that's when you get this SPECT scan. But it depends, where you are. Most likely you either get a CT scan or an MRI scan. Okay. So these are the kind of scans they would do. Now, okay, they've done the initial assessment. So usually it takes time to do all this. I would give about, they say once the GP has referred you to the memory clinic, they will get a report. So what happens is it becomes kind of stretched out. And this is a very difficult time for the family, because you're not quite sure whether the person has dementia. You're not quite sure they don't have something. So you can't put a lot of things in place. But if you get a big vascular dementia, then it could be quite sudden as well. And this is a time, Dr. Google is quite good because, you know, there are things you can look up and start keeping a diary of what's happening. Because with a diary, people are able to sort of, when they look at it, a pattern emerges of what's happening to this person. Okay. And this is the time, if it's at a mild form, there are certain things you need to start getting ready. And there are dementia specialist nurses who are called admiral nurses. So there are few, but if you do think, you can get support from them because they are quite specialized. And usually it's your GP who will look after you. There's very little the hospital specialist will do because dementia is not something you can cure. So usually, unless it's a vascular stroke or something, there's very little the hospital consultants will do. So most of the time, it's your GP who will be looking after you. Now, you know, when people say, oh, somebody's got dementia, I say, think about it in the same way as you say, somebody's got diabetes. All right? Once you get a diagnosis of diabetes, you know you have to change. You can't eat sugary things. There are certain modifications you have to do. You have to live with your diabetes, isn't it? Same thing. Dementia cannot be a life sentence. It will get worse, but when you start, you have to start thinking, okay, what can I do? What kind of adaptations can I make so that whatever life I have now, it's just not that I've stopped living. So I always tell, whatever time you get a diagnosis of a dementia, think about how am I going to live with this condition? Because it will be there until the end of life. So, you know, you can't just keep on restricting people. So I tell about my family, like my father-in-law, you know, an elderly person, they need to socialize because that's how they had lived all the time. And at that time, you know, when somebody passed away, a lot of the elderly men would go to Golders Green crematorium. So he would go on the bus 183 or something, but we can't restrict. So I used to ask one or two of his friends, if there's somebody I know, can you come? Then the two of you travel together. Or can you come? Then when you go to play cards together. Because, you know, you need activity. And then it's not always possible to do some of the activities. So we need to now start thinking as a community that if we know more older people, people who may have dementia, what sort of activities can we do? And something that I really liked at time of the pandemic, there were a lot of Zoom sessions. So people would do armchair yoga. I mean, Lavinia would do with her mother-in-law and people would do it in their own homes. So I think once we open up, even if we keep some of these activities which were online, it will keep a lot of those people engaged, right? Because otherwise for them to go out is very difficult. Usually satsangs are really good because one thing that is good for a person with dementia, they will remember the songs when they used to sing. And especially, you know, when you do bhakti and you clap with the rhythm, that really helps kind of connect them with themselves. So some of the activities that we have in our community, we really need to keep them going and really welcome people who are slightly, you know, in that phase of dementia to be participating. And some places actually have dementia cafes now, so that people with dementia can really interact with other people who may have the same condition. Now, looking after somebody 24/7, it is a big job. So whoever in the family, this is where you need your local authority. Because sometimes, you know, our community, we don't want to take anything from the council. I know that. But if you do have a carer's assessment or whatever, this is important because it gives you some of the places that you can go and seek support. And in this country, until October next year, 2023, If you have savings of more than £23,400, then all the care that you need, you have to pay for it. The local authority won't pay for it, especially if you need care for dressing in the morning. You know, if you become incontinent or whatever, you need somebody to come and look after you at different times in the day. This you will have to pay. So for this reason, you need to do with the local authority. And the most difficult is having this family conversation. Because, you know, when somebody gets a diagnosis of dementia, people think, ganda thi gaya. As a community, we are not really open to talk about something. Or if you notice something, we don't usually ask anybody. But this is where it's really important, because at some point, the person who has dementia will not be able to make decisions for themselves. They will lose the mental capacity to look after themselves. So this is where what their wishes are, we need to start writing. And there may be people in the audience who have done power of attorney or a living will. So usually we do a will, which will be opened, you know, as part of our probate. So once the funeral has happened, that's when the actual will be opened. But what happens to you in those last few years when you can't make a decision? And this is called a living will, or more, if you go to the medical, they will call it an advanced care plan. So this is really important. So people ask me, okay, what can we do to say delay or, you know, not get dementia? I'm going to finish very quickly. So one thing is about regular exercise. Your GP, everybody says, take regular exercise, walking. And when I showed you that picture with the brain, getting enough oxygen in your brain is really, really important. Same, healthy diet. What we call in Gujarati, sattvic. You know, I mean, yes, we do get the gulab jamuns and the samosas and all that, but we need good nutrition to keep a good, healthy brain. A lot of people do concentrate that you stimulate. So the brain is like, if you don't use it, then you lose it as we get older. Yeah. So people do Sudoku, even like, you know, if you know an older person, people who like to do Bharatkam or do things, knitting. Knitting is quite good. Sometimes I know of older ladies and they used to do, you know, clean the ration, like jiru saaf kariya pe ke game de. Even doing those small things, even if they do a little plate at a time, that's really good because it stimulates the brain and the finger movements. Yeah. Playing cards. A really, really important thing for anybody over 50 or whatever is getting a very good sleep routine. Sleep is the time our brain recharges itself. It recharges like a battery. And if you're sleep deprived, sometimes I'm or responsible that you make it late, you're watching a serial or something, and the next morning you're waking up to go to work. So when you start losing sleep, that's when it starts affecting your brain. And for the older people, you know, we used to have this tradition of after lunch, we have a big lunch and then they would have a nap. I think that's really good. You know, bapore thodi war aaram karile. That's really good because that gives them the time during the day to really recharge themselves. And there are some people, as they age, they'll fall asleep on the sofa. They'll have a short nap, but that's okay, right? Because the nap is when your brain recharges both emotionally and the activity it has. And the other thing is, you know, I talk about Ramdev or whatever, doing this pranayam. In yoga, we have some really good exercises that actually helps us to keep our brain. You know, people who do 3 deep ohms. Can you imagine? You take a deep breath, you use all your lungs, and then the sound, you know, it comes up. The dhwani that comes up, we actually have something in our toolbox that can really help keep our brains very well. And the last and least is social connection. And this is where women to women come in, because you offer this, you know, meeting other people, doing activities together, going on a trip together, that laughter, playfulness, garbas. this is what keeps us young. This is, if you keep on doing the activity, that in itself will delay the dementia in any person. Okay, and this is where I finish, and we can have a question and answer session. So it's kind of a overall run through, but I'm happy to take any detailed questions anybody has. So I'm going to now stop sharing, and we can go back to just seeing everybody. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Varsha. That was really informative. That was absolutely wonderful. I think what we'll do is we'll start taking the questions, Saroj, if we can just have a look at the chat, and we'll do every other one.
Bodraben would like to know, can the progress be slower with medication?
So for Alzheimer's, there is a medication called Evocet, but it has some changes in the brain, but it depends how a person responds to it. But you need to make sure the other things you do as well. A good diet, good exercise. Good exercise would actually help as well. So medication on its own will not do all the things, but it can slow down.
Okay, what sort of medication, Varsha?
So there are one or two, it depends. As I said, I'm not a clinician, so usually I don't give names, because on the packet, it depends on what your GP prescribes. But there's an Aeroset or whatever. There are 2 or 3 medications which are for Alzheimer's. And sometimes if you have vascular dementia, they give a blood thinner, right? So that you get less of the cardiovascular medications. And if your blood pressure is not controlled, then they will give you medication for your blood pressure. So it depends on individuals.
Oh, okay.
Okay, it's not blanket. Something that I have seen is, I've done Ayurvedic, because I researched into this. And in Ayurveda, they do Shirodhara. Okay, so they pour oil over your head, warm oil, in a rhythmic way. So what they do is, if you remember, I say the brain is like a jelly. So if you put it in a rhythm, the jelly wobbles. And if there's some things not quite right, it connects within itself. That's why, if somebody's done Shirodhara, after 5-10 minutes, you really feel sleepy. It just puts you in a really deep sleep. But that's something a non-intrusive way. But that's the kind of thing, if Indian head massage, again, stimulating the scalp. So these are things which will not have a side effect, but can help in another way.
That's good to know, Varshabin. Thank you very much. Saroj?
There's a question from Bhadra again saying, is schizophrenia a kind of dementia?
Schizophrenia is actually a mental health condition.
Mental health, yeah.
Yeah. But, when people have these, they think something is happening when it's not. They hallucinate. Yeah. They think somebody's talking to them. That kind of hallucination happens with dementia. But they're not schizophrenic. It's just that the wiring in their brain has changed, and they start hearing and seeing things which are not there, because the way their vision and their hearing is, that gets impacted. So it's not schizophrenia, but the hallucination. So people with dementia can hallucinate.
Thank you.
There's another question which says, is there anything Ayurveda or natural remedy we can take, like ashwagandha?
So yes, yeah. So in Ayurveda, they have certain herbs, like they say, okay, walnuts. The shape of a walnut looks like
a brain.
It's like a brain.
Yeah, but the oils within the nuts. So now we say, if you're a vegetarian or whatever, having a little bit, just a small fistful of nuts is good for you, because you get those the omega oils from the, because like cod liver oil, fish oils were given for people when they were young or whatever. But in ours, so if people are vegetarian or whatever, then a few nuts. Some people say sesame oil, okay, is quite good. And so they have tahini or whatever, tal. So there are things which have high calcium or high content of nutrition. Because if you remember, as you start aging, your diet, your portion size becomes small.
Smaller, yeah.
Your appetite starts getting affected.
Mm.
So how do you give? So it's like, sukri with badaminate, or, for my father-in-law, sometimes if he got agitated, I would make lapsi, because the cooking and the smell of lapsi was done when there was a happy time, right? And he loved that. So it's like you need to know the person, what they like and how you can give them certain things that helps. Kind of them kind of when they get agitated, or also the nutrition that they can take.
Okay.
Oh, that's very useful to know. So all of our background, all of the remedies we use, they're all actually very beneficial.
Yeah. So, like, imagine somebody getting older, and they're agitated. I mean, if you're going to try and talk to them, it's not going to go. So sometimes you do a distraction, like when young children, okay, hut pakedi hoy ke whatever. So you take out something. And one thing I would say, start making a photo book, important things in their life, so that they look at the photographs, and then every time you can go back to the same photo book. Yeah. And they start remembering things, connecting to the things, because the worst thing is when you feel you are completely lost. So for me, if somebody says, I'm going to drop you in the middle of Tiananmen Square in Beijing, I can't read what's written, I can't understand the people, you get really scared. So people with dementia, when they can't, the cognition, they can't remember things, that's the kind of scared feeling that they get. So something the Alzheimer's Society say, think about a bookshelf, okay? The books are ordered, the new ones on the top, the old ones at the bottom. If you shake the bookshelf, which ones will drop out first? The ones from the top.
At the top.
From the top.
So, but the ones at the bottom might still be there. So you need to use those things that are at the bottom of the shelf in their life. So, like I used to run a Lotus Dementia Cafe, and what we would do is chai and chat. And sometimes what I would do is take out some velar, papad kariye, or I'll take out certain things, that they knew. An old sari, or some old music, a black and white, every time something different, so that they can connect. I had one kanani or whatever, and then we would have a laugh about it, but it's just making connections to the things that they knew.
Excellent.
So we need to know the person and their earlier life, because if I think about my father-in-law, he was born in a village in India. When he was a teenager, he went to Kenya. In their 50s, they moved to UK. I mean, they had seen so much change.
So much change.
Excellent.
So,
okay.
But just giving some tips at the same time, so that...
No, that's very good, Varsha. Now, someone's raised their hand. I'm going to ask them to unmute. Patu, can you please unmute and ask your question? Patu? Patu, please unmute yourself.
There.
Okay, Patu,
Badra,
ask your question.
okay.
Hello, Patu, are you there?
Can I ask mine before she does?
Yeah, I think go ahead. I don't know what problem she has. You go ahead, Padraben.
Okay. Varsha, I was told by somebody that a person who's suffering from dementia, if they say, oh, where has, for example, Ma kya gaya? And you say, do you remember Ma died? And he was telling us, this guy was telling us that when they say that, it's the first time the pain for having lost Ma is there. Is that correct?
So again, memory is something, because our memory is based on the knowledge, feelings, what circumstances, where we are. Yeah. So imagine your memory is not so sharp and you're not quite sure. So somebody may have given you the information before and you haven't received it. But when you are emotionally connected to something, આપણે ગુજરાતીમાં કહીએ કે આઘાત લાગી જાય. Yeah. So it's such that at that certain point they get that level of lucidity, we call it, that they are able to recognize and then process that somebody has actually is not there. So I mean, I lived in Belgium for a while, and my mother-in-law was in hospital, so we took my father-in-law to Belgium. After 2 days, he said, "No, you're not telling me. Something has happened." And we literally had to bring him next day, say, "No, Ma is here. Go sit him down in the hospital," saying, "No, she's fine. You can talk to her," because you know what I said, "Aghat lagi jai," because they can't quite connect what's happening. And they, once they can't see, they can't feel that person, it's very different, because the way we perceive is not just memory. We touch somebody, we know them, there are certain what we call cognition. There are so many ways, their voice. So it is that we need to, when you break some sad news with somebody with dementia, just be gentle, and sometimes a white light doesn't kind of harm anybody. So, if you think the circumstances are not right, you just like patavu pade ke gamete, because that can happen.
Thank you very much, Varsha.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Badra.
Thank you so much. Next question, Viva.
Hi, just it's more a comment rather than a question. So first of all, Varsha, thank you. That was so informative. And I think I can say that a lot of us have come across people who are in the early stages of dementia. So I just wanted to end on a positive, which you touched on, the medication. And there's so much research going on. In 2019, there were about 5 new medication for all different types of dementia. And the Alzheimer's Society.org UK, if Geeta is agreeable, I can put the link. They are doing a lot of research, and they're also looking for volunteers to help with the research. So if you got someone in the family who wants to take part, and these are trials that are regulated by the MHRA, they are fully controlled, they have an ethics approval, so they are safe drugs before you take part. And I think if people are interested, that option is there. So it's such a important topic. So I think it's nice to have some positives there. And also, they're also looking at a gene therapy study for Alzheimer's. And that might be something that changes the DNA in the cells. So although it may not help people who got Alzheimer's now, I think the next generation will benefit. So there's a lot of work going on out there, and I just wanted to share that. But once again, Saroj, Geeta, and Women to Women, as always, you bring such important topics. And like you said, Varsha, these are conversations we don't want to have sometimes, but you made it so much easier. And thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you very
So,
much.
can I just comment on what Vibaben is saying? This is really important. We are going to live in UK. Our children are going to live in UK. So even for us women, when I talked about cardiac, a heart attack, the drugs, a lot of it is tested on white males, and our body is different. So taking part in trials is really important. And it came in the pandemic. The oximeter we had, a lot of the oximeters were trialed on white skin. And the results that came out with a slightly darker skin was different.
Yeah.
And then they had to calibrate it differently. So I'm just saying something we've just been through in the last 2 years. So if if you live in Northwest London, Imperial College Health Partners have a program called Discover.
Yeah.
And they actually help, if you want to take part in, you don't have to trials or whatever, depending on what you want to do, or even other Alzheimer's Society, because this vascular aspect, there are more people with diabetes and vascular conditions in our communities. And if we take part in research, it would help our communities going forward. So
absolutely,
very, very important
agree
point.
with that. That's a very good point. During
Actually,
the
I am
pandemic,
one of the members there.
brain work
I am, yeah.
to get blood tests from them. It's very difficult to get our people to take, sometimes even give blood as a donation. So I think what you're saying is very important. We need to take part in these studies. So
Yeah,
there is
absolutely.
us when we need it.
Thank you, Viva.
Thank you again.
I mean,
Thank you so much.
That's
if
very
your
good
network
information.
would like, I
Points.
can ask somebody from Discover to come and talk to you what they do, how they do it. It would be interesting subject as well.
Yeah,
Good
that would
idea.
be. That would be. Thank you,
Yes,
Varsha. I
yeah.
think that would be very, very useful. Thank you very much. Okay, Pratibha, you got your hand up. Would you like to say something?
It's just, just first of all, Varsha, thank you very much. It was very good. I just want to share some information because my mom, who passed away 2 years ago, suffered from dementia. And her last year was like forgetting things, getting distressed. She was just getting up at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, opening the door, saying that my son who's young, he's run away, things like that. And then also like remembering my dad, that he was sleeping upstairs, and telling the carer that you need to cook for him and things like that. So all that, like you said, a lot of the things, back memories come back. And, forgetting things like talking to somebody. As we're sitting there, she's talking to somebody. And we're saying, who are you talking to? She said, I'm talking to them. And, just general things. Just things like that, which used to happen years ago when people used to just come in the houses and just sit and have coffee or tea or whatever. So it's just a few things that my mom went through. And it's exactly what Varsha was saying,
So,
yeah, but
the other thing is what you are
That's what
raising
happens.
is, that if they just
They
open the
remember.
door, leave it open or whatever, safeguarding is a big issue. So this
Yeah.
mental capacity
Yes.
Yeah.
and safeguarding, sometimes say कि मारी बड़ी वस्तु लग जाए छे, or social worker आवे तो એવું काई, it becomes then the family gets into sort of.
And one thing, the main thing was the gas
Yes.
thing. She used to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and switch the gas on, and she was making tea for my dad at 2 o'clock in the morning. And the carer used to get up and say, "Basu karo છો તમે તો કે હું બાપુજી માટે ચાય બનાવું છે નવો ચાય." So we had to actually fit a
Lock.
tap on
Lock.
so that ratna suve ne to tap band kari diye, so she could not open the gas at 2 o'clock. Sometimes if she's doing it, she could, something could happen at 2 o'clock in the morning. You just don't know. So we had to get a tap.
So some older people change. They don't have a gas cooker anymore. They put an electric cooker which you can switch off.
Yeah.
So it's once the finish, then the electricity wouldn't come through.
Yeah, that's right. Once you switch it off.
So it's something, locks that you do, because in this country you can't just lock the door and go out and leave that person inside.
Yeah.
So some of the things, there are people who put certain cameras, but again, where you put your cameras, that's also important. Yeah. And the worst part at that age, what you're talking about your mom is, imagine they have dementia and then they have a fall.
Yeah.
If they end up in a hospital ward, that becomes very, very difficult for them.
Yeah.
And then again, you get them
confused then.
So not only have they got dementia now, they are physically incapacitated.
Yeah. Well, my mom was 95 when she passed away, but we had a carer 24 hours. So we were sure there was a carer there looking after her, make sure she doesn't fall or anything like that. But these things happen. People do fall. Even if the carer is there, it still happens. So just have to be careful. That's all. Yeah. Just a few things to share. That's all. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. But this is why these discussions are really important, that people get a breath of that final year. Care homes, what happens, and it's hard. It's hard for the family.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think you need to have a discussion within the family. Yeah. Because you can imagine there are two brothers and a sister, and all three may not agree on the same things.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And then sometimes what happens between the brothers and the sister, because they want something different for their parent or whatever. So the earlier you have this discussion in a bigger family unit and you decide, okay, we are going to write down this advanced care plan, then it becomes easier when you have to start making decisions at certain points.
We had to do power of attorney, as you said, very early on finance and on medical. And obviously my mom's will was there, which she'd done a few years ago, and then she'd done it again. And then power of attorney was me, and also on financial side and on the medical side as well. We can make the decision what to do on her. So that's
most important.
It was very, very easy because we had everything.
For this, sometimes, we are a very patriarchal society. The sons or whatever, the men are listed, but they may be traveling, they may be. So sometimes it's always good to have two people so that you have a second person, the primary and the secondary. And sometimes, because if you don't have the advanced care plan, usually when you go to the hospital, they ask for next of kin. They don't ask who is the substantive carer.
No.
Okay? Because in legal terms, there isn't anything like you are the main carer.
No.
So this power of attorney and both the health and financial is really important. But within an hour you could cover all of that. So
એક વાત કહું, કારણ કે આપણી સ્ત્રીઓ છે ને તે કપડા આપણે નાવા માટે પેલી કેરર આવે અને જો બધા કપડા કાઢે તો એ લોકોને ગમતું નથી હોતું એવું, because they've never undressed in public. Even sisters haven't undressed in public. So they find it very frustrating, and they get wild and
agitated.
They push, very agitated. So that's one of the things as well,
But look, one thing of which is apne astitva is going to the bathroom. When the time comes that you have to put an incontinence pad for men or women, that is one of the toughest decisions. That's one of the toughest decisions. But in this country, you cannot, it's very difficult to manage any other way.
Without, yes.
And we are lucky that the NHS will provide. It will take time. So I would recommend everybody, don't push it as late as possible. Try some things. Or if you're going just for a trip, say, just, so that you don't have an accident and don't feel embarrassed. Because
get them used to it
it's
slowly.
like, a child, when you take them to school, you do half a day or whatever. You need to start so that they become ready when they restart really needing it. Because this is going to, they will need that. And the sooner we can kind of start with it and the conversations gradually, so that if they reject it, come back after a week or so, something like that.
Okay, there's a question from somebody about a scan. They've been diagnosed and they need a scan. How can you speed that up?
So at the
Is there
moment,
any way you can answer that?
Capacity. So if the GP there's a place called InHealth around our area, which is like a private provider. But, the capacity at the moment is reduced and the demand is so high. So, they are talking about people who are waiting for 2 years for a treatment. Wow. And this is what they've said. You need to eliminate 2-year waits, but people waiting over a year, 18 months is the backlog is huge.
Minimum. Okay.
No, but it's like, it depends, with your GP, if you can negotiate. Look, with this condition, your GP suddenly becomes your best friend. Manavi, Patavi, whatever you need to do, you need to keep them like your best friend, because whatever you need, they will have to provide. And more, the hospitals can't cope anymore. And the GPs are under real pressure. So at the moment, the times are really, really difficult.
Okay, Patu, are you there? She's got her hand raised, but she's not saying anything, so I don't know. Let me see if there's any more questions that we haven't answered yet.
So, Saroj, what I will do, I did it for a talk with the Jain Health Initiative. We have a resource list. I will just put it on a Word document. And I can send it to you. And I'm happy to share this presentation if anybody else wants to, because I've done it with pictures. Sometimes if you need to sit down with somebody older, it's easier to explain with the pictures.
Okay, somebody has said, would love to know how we can receive more community help for parents, for example, IT classes, etc., etc.
So there is, at the moment, because the whole health is going digital. So for some time, you have to fill out a e-consult form or something to even get an appointment with them. So there are some classes. So there were classes for people with diabetes that were started.
Yeah.
I can, there are some, Kenton Center had some. There was somebody called Bipin Bhai Dattani. He started classes for the elderly. So there are things happening. And this digital literacy. So today, our government has announced that so much of health is going to go digital through the NHS app. They're putting something like £2 billion available. And some of it is, but we need to ask our health. We need to ask our, whoever is commissioning in our areas. So what we need, a few champions who speak and say, look, our elderly can't do this. Why don't you provide this? Because the money will be available. Okay, but we need to speak up. So if, I can send some numbers if people want to start classes.
So who to go to, yeah.
Yeah.
Who to
but
ask
again,
for help, yeah.
Varsha, also, when there's dementia, you tend to go back to your mother tongue a lot more, even if you are sort of proficient in English. But, if you're brought up with Gujarati, you want to talk more in Gujarati. Is that right?
Absolutely. So the new language, as I said, this analogy of a bookshelf. So you've acquired the English language. So imagine if you're 80 now, you would have spoken Gujarati for 60 years almost. It's only last few years that you've started speaking English or whatever. And something is also, people who are more educated somehow manage the dementia a little bit better because they have things about reading they can tap into. Music is good one. And using kind of music they can connect to. So yes, this language will go back. Language will go back towards the earlier years. And even the vocabulary will change. It will become smaller. Yeah.
Past life badi yaad rahe, but recent hui ne na rahe. My mother had that as well. But iki tumari cho, but mane khabar nathi because I lived abroad. I lived here. She lived in Kenya, so I didn't see her that often. So she knew that my brother who was a carer and some other people who were there, she would see regularly. But it was quite difficult if because I saw her after quite a few years and then I regularly went to see her because, I know she was getting older. But I have seen that people forget the immediate what's happening. They remember what's happened in the past,
Yeah, as Varsha Ben said, like the bookcase, the oldest memories are at the bottom. The newest memories are at the top. So the newest memories are what you lose.
Rubbed off.
The oldest,
the
oldest remains. So they might not recognize any new additions to the house. Even their daughter, they might forget.
Yeah.
But they'll remember their mother, father, or whatever.
So I like the idea of what Varsha Ben said, show them the photographs of their early life and so on.
Yes.
I think that would make them actually start talking. Otherwise, they keep quiet and there isn't much that they contribute to the conversation.
And the other thing, like they say, that you should try and make things as easy for them as possible. So, with like English people, before they used to put the kettle on top of the hob and they didn't have an electric kettle. So if you had to give them an electric kettle now, they'd probably put it on top of a hob and try and light it.
Yes.
But you make your life easier by getting them that kettle they can put on the hob. Make their life easier.
Okay. One thing, so my father-in-law, so my younger son looks very much like his dad. So every day when he comes back from school, the dada would take, let's go to Londi, so go and buy a Kit Kat and come back. And that was the joy in his life, that, he remembered his younger son. Maybe he never had time to spend with the son, but with the grandson, he captured those memories. So sometimes, you get this generation gap. That if you look like somebody like your dad or mom, they would think, oh yeah, they will call you by that name. So dikri ne badle granddaughter ne, they would say, okay,
because they've got more time. They spend more time. Before they were working and all that as well. And because of their condition, they forget
So, like initially when Mihir was about 3-4, I would say, with Dada like this, I mean, you're going to go on the streets, but then you realize that it will be okay. They're quite, and the two of them got on very well. So that relationship, and that was the good part of living in the extended family. Sometimes if they become, because this is happening more and more now, that we are not living together. So buying Bapuji, can you imagine an 80-year-old bar looking after an 85-year-old Bapuji who has now got dementia?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
isolation makes it worse.
Yeah. So this is the situation that then make it difficult. And if one of them now starts going into the hospital or something, the other one feels completely lost. So, the dynamics, and somehow, we have to cope with it, but there are some challenges with that as well.
You often find that the other partner goes within 6 months or something like that,
Yes.
They just can't bear the separation. Yeah.
Absolutely. They feel lost.
Anyway, thank you, Aswin.
Thank you very much for your...
Everybody
is saying it's been very informative, Varsha.
One more thing that has always been mentioned, that people say that when you go and meet somebody in a care home who's got dementia, they won't even remember that you've been. So they say, why bother going? But although they won't remember you've been, they'll remember the feelings, the happiness they got from you having been to see them. And this is why it's important to keep on going to see them. They'll remember the feeling.
So they will not have the memory of it, but by the time the 15 minutes or half an hour you are there, that half an hour is really important for them. It improves their quality of life. It keeps them connected.
એટલે આપણે કહીએ ને કે બા ભલે મને ભૂલી ગયા હોય પણ હું તો બાને નથી ભૂલી ને એટલે હું તો એમને જોવા જઈશ જ.
Absolutely. And it's not forgetting. Sometimes a glimmer would happen and they would give you something and you say, no, that's how she used to do it. There are expressions or things that happen that you say, yeah, the person that you knew is still there in that body.
Yeah. Yeah, I connect with somebody every day. They keep forgetting. I say, હું શું કરું ભૂલી જાઉં છું. મને કાલે અહીંયા જવાનું હતું પણ હું ભૂલી ગયો. સારું થયું મને યાદ કરાવ્યું. So I am like a life support. When they live on their own, it's very difficult, I sort of, they've told me, but they forget.
Yeah, but Saroj, even for these Zoom meetings, we have to actually remind so many people that, come on, it's starting now, like 5 minutes before I ring 3 or 4 people.
I just sent a message across all the groups, come join in now.
No, Geeta, this is Badraben. We run a yoga group and they're all elderly ladies. So this is why she's saying, and she's a very highly educated lady. She's in Badraben, Kyoto. Explain karo to jarak.
No, it's all right.
Gujarati Sahityama. She's very knowledgeable lady.
I was a teacher in Kenya, but I became a librarian. And then I was a librarian for Asian and Black community in Wandsworth for 22 years. And it was like the first kind of library service. And I became more Indian because I had to teach myself about the different Indian languages, Pakistani, Sri Lankan, Indian culture. And I am the vice president of Gujarati Literary Academy. And અમારું શ્રાવિકા સત્સંગ મંડળમાં પણ અમે બહુ સારી રીતે મળીએ છીએ અને ઘણી બધી પ્રવૃત્તિ કરીએ છીએ.
So a lot of times this talk I give in Gujarati, like in Nairobi, when they're elderly. I mean, I'm not that proficient, but enough that I can get it,
Get by.
But I just felt today, not knowing on Zoom, it's a little bit more difficult to speak in Gujarati.
Very well.
Varsha, you did such an excellent job. You got it more across to us than somebody else from another community. Because you know the background, because you Gujarati, so you really got it across to everybody a lot more.
Everybody actually said you were.
I like that bit. Magajnu dahi thai gayu.
No, everybody said you were excellent, Varsha. Everybody thoroughly enjoyed the session. I think somebody wanted to see the slide of the funding thing. I don't know if they're there.
I don't think Amache. I've got another.
Okay.
I will send the details because look, it's changing October 2023. There is a cap. But we need to get our people prepared so that they start keeping records of what care they're buying or what care. There's somebody, Mayuri Ben, or who's got hand up?
Mayuri. Mayuri Ben, you can unmute.
જતા રહે આવ્યા મોઢું દેખાડો મયુરબેન.
Show your video. Unmute. I can hear somebody in the background.
No, she has unmuted, but we can't see her.
We can't hear her either.
Just for my information, most of the participants, are they from Brent, Harrow, Hillingdon, or wider?
I am from Hillingdon.
Yeah, most of them are, but they could be from anywhere.
I'm from Hillingdon, but I asked my sister who lives in Clapham South, she's from Wandsworth. I asked her to join as well. So she's from Wandsworth, definitely somebody from South London.
But there's a lot of changes coming. So from Friday, the CCG will be kind of put aside an integrated care system. So at some point, we should start engaging with the way things are happening. So if anybody wants to participate, become a bit involved in the NHS, contact me and I will put you in touch with whoever, because I work, as I said, as a lay partner advisor. So I know lots of places, whatever you are interested in.
So, Varsha, is it just for Ealing and Harrow? Harrow and Wembley? Brent? Or anybody?
No.
Because we have ladies from all over.
So 8 boroughs of Northwest London: Westminster, Kensington and Chelsea, Hammersmith and Fulham, Ealing, Hounslow, and then Brent, Harrow, Hillingdon. It covers about 2.4 million people. And that's how
I'm from Leicester.
Somebody from Leicester, good.
And I'm from Northamptonshire, Wellingborough.
Welcome.
Wellingborough.
I'm from Hammersmith.
Oh, brilliant.
Varsha, we had somebody from Pune. I asked her to join. She's visiting India in Britain, so I asked her to join as well. So she can take something back
get a lot of us.
Yeah. So she can take back something about
how the world, Varsha. We get people from America joining in. We have people from all over the world.
On our regular sessions, we get regular people from India, Mumbai, America, everywhere, and they're regulars. But this is one off, but people have the
very nice session today.
Today's session was absolutely amazing, Varsha.
Session we had today.
Very good
if there are
information.
other subjects or whatever, so I'm happy to come and talk to you.
Definitely. Shall we?
Varsha, koine jawannu man nathi thatu jo badao.
No, unfortunately, I think we do have to end.
We have to.
Dod kalak thyo lagbhag. So we would have to end the session. But if Varsha doesn't mind, if we can send the chat to her, koi pan question miss aata hai, or you let us know, we can always email Varsha, right, Varsha?
Yes, on WhatsApp, or just put me on, and happy to look. If somebody wants a personal service, they are difficulty, then I'm happy. I do one-to-one family support, whatever they need. As I said, I wanted us to have this conversation, otherwise the talk becomes too long.
Yeah,
absolutely. No. This was just right. Very good.
Thank you very much, Varsha.
Krishna Ben Arora wants to ask something.
Geeta.
Krishna Ben Arora wants to ask something. Krishna Ben Arora. Unmute yourself, Krishna Ben. Unmute yourself.
Okay, I've sent you an invitation. Can you unmute yourself, Krishna Ben?
Oh.
Yeah, go on.
I'm unmute.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello, we can hear you now.
Yeah.
We can hear you, yes.
Very much. It was really interesting. It opens my, eyes, like how one, I don't know who gets it and who don't get it, but it's very interesting to know.
Okay, good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, question Varsha Ben ko puchtu tu. Okay, like sort of sleep helps you. Yeah, but jene continuous problem hoy sleep no, e loka શું કરે?
Is it that they feel sleepy all the time, or is it
ના
that
ના
they
કે જે
can't?
લોકોને નીંદર બહુ આવતી જ ના હોય, no matter how hard they try, what can they do? Because you know, in theory, you need to get sleep, but you're not simply not able to get it. What do?
So there is something what they call about is sleep hygiene. So, usually a lot of people say don't drink tea and coffee after 6 o'clock.
Caffeine.
A lot of time, because we watch television or whatever, we overstimulate our mind. And our mind is like a monkey, it keeps on jumping. So what we need to do is really calm the mind. So I know they call mindfulness. Now the English are doing it as well. That basically bringing your mind to a focus.
Peaceful.
Sometimes it's like divo karine ke tame mala karo, or something that brings not this jumping monkey mind, quieter, and then you follow a pattern every single day. Yoga nindra, whoever do it, it starts with actually relaxing your body. Start with the toe, and the way they say relax. And this is something that's really important, because sometimes we carry the world's burden on our shoulders and we can't let go. And we all need to learn to let go, because, you would have seen students who wait half the night for exams and whatever, and then 2 days they just sleep it out. Because the brain needs to be recharged. But as adults, we fall into something. So I will send something about what's called sleep hygiene and really work. And some people get apnea. So as you age, you can't breathe properly. Your obesity ke hoy, ke parkha on the side. So sometimes you move this side, other time you move other side. So there's something, and that needs to be tested. It's called sleep apnea. So that, if that is a problem, then they might give you a machine or whatever.
A machine at night. But they need to go to the GP if that's a problem. I think Varsha is coming up to 9:30.
Sorry. Another thing I've noticed, if I've done a puzzle quite late before going to bed, then I find it difficult to go back to sleep. And I'm still doing puzzles in my mind.
You should not do anything that's active, overstimulative before you go to bed, not even gym. Even that works you up and makes you hyper. So things that slow you down. I think some people can listen to Shanti mantras or whatever before they go to bed. I'm sure they must all help.
Anything relaxing. Anything relaxing, soothing music.
Absolutely. So we've got quite a lot of activities, ladies. We've even got a book club. We've got bhajans, we've got Bollywood, we've got yoga, you name it, we've got it. And Varsha, I think you'll agree that will all help. We have a lot of social activities going on as well. So just join in, contact us, and we will add you to all our groups. And Varsha, you were absolutely amazing. I think you're probably one of the best talkers we've had so far. You really got through, because yours was geared especially for Indians, Hindus, Gujaratis, they really get it, the background, everything. So that really helps. Thank you so much, Varsha.
Welcome. But
Thank you,
the
Varsha.
offer is open. If you need anything, do come back, and there might be other things we could talk
If you got anything else, we'll call you again.
Sure.
Okay then.
Okay, thank you everybody. Thank you so much for attending.
Thank you very
sleep
much.
well and look after yourselves.
Thank you.
Jai Shri Krishna badane.
Jai Shri Krishna.
Jai Shri Krishna Badraben. No more TV.
Geeta Ben.
હા કોણ બોલે છે? ગીતા બેન.
Shobna Patel.
Okay, Shobna Ben, બોલે લો.
Geeta Ben, it's very nice to gain this knowledge from Varsha Ben. But at the end of the session, can you please put her number on? Because I'm in Brent and I want to ask some more questions.
Shobna Ben, હમણાં તો questions પૂછાય નહીં, પણ અમને questions મોકલજો, then maybe we can send it to Varsha Ben. હવે તો છે ને, it's gone on for long enough. હવે તો આપણે બંધ કરવો પડશે.
now. I can ring her later on.
No, why don't you give your number and then pass it on to her?
Shall I give you my number?
Yes,
Yeah.
put it on the chat or
9.
hold on. You can't say that. Things like that. Wait.
Shobnaben, why don't you just send it to us? You
Okay.
must have one of our contact numbers.
Got your contact. Yes, I'll send it to you.
Then I'll send it off to Varsha, okay? I mean,
I
Okay.
will phone you. I'll
Thank
phone
you
you.
so much.
You're welcome.
okay,
Okay.
okay.
I have
Thank you.
missed the program. I'm very sorry. Hello to everyone.
It's been recorded.
What is
It's
the
been
best way
recorded.
to see the program? Can I
Sorry, Kirtiben, what are you saying?
may program
It's
missed?
been recorded.
Oh, yeah, we have recorded. We will send you a link.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
Thank
I'll
you.
take it from there. Thank you.
Thank
Lovely.
you,
Okay, thank
everyone.
you,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Thank you so much, Varshaben, again. Thank you, Saroj, for getting the ball
Good night.
rolling and doing this. It is a very
Thank you for
useful thing to have.
Thank you.
Good
It is
night,
very
everybody. Jai Shri
night.
Krishna. Sleep
Thank you.
well.
Jai Shri Krishna. Good night.
God bless.
God bless.
Thank you.